difference between the static versus mutable is that mutable you can change afterward, after you create it. And if it's not mutable, then you can't change it after you make it. So let's talk about what they are. So NSString holds words and symbols. So for example, anything, any word, any lines, for example, your name or anything like that, classroom name, class name, or if you're making an app for a list of recipes, recipe names, titles, they're all stored in NSString. So if you want to store anything, you would store it in the form of NSString. An NSArray, if you have programmed before, you know what an array is, and it's the exact same thing. Except NSArray is an array that holds a list of NS objects. And it's retrieved by indices. So it's basically the same idea as normal list or arrays, except that now you can only store NS objects. What are NS objects? NS objects are basically any object that you make. So for example, int would not be an NS object because they're primitive data types. So anything else, essentially, most of them that you're going to use in Objective-C, for example, NSString or NSDictionary, they're going to be NS objects. So NSArray is a structure that holds a list of objects, and it's retrieved by indices. So, for example, you have a list of things, and for example, in element 2, I have this string called hello. Then I would say, oh, I have this list, this NS array. Okay, these are going to be filled by one array. So you're going to say NS array, and then I want in this index 2, I want the element over there. Then that way so a list is, this is a list. As opposed to a string where it's just holds symbols and words. And with an NS dictionary, it also holds a list. Well, now we go list, but like a number of NS objects, except that you retrieve each object by a key, and this key can be an NS string or other data structure. For now, we're not going to talk about it. So instead of this, instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to have NS. Dictionary, you're going to have a key. For example, I want my key to be, I don't know, CAS313. And then when I put in CAS313, I'm going to get the object, whatever that is that you want to store at that location. So now we talked about what it is, so let's talk about how to make one. So, in Objective-C, basically, essentially everything. When you want to make a new object, in Java you would say new. In Java you would say new something. And in Objective-C, you basically do the exact same thing. For example, you want to. Okay, so each of them you're going to have two types: mutable and non-mutable. And we're going to talk one by one. Let's talk about them one by one. So first I'll talk about the ones that don't change. Then first of all, you're going to declare a pointer, and then that pointer, let me imagine more space. I'm going to just, because it's static, so once you create it, you cannot change it. And then this is the fast way for Objective-C to put your string, to make a string, basically. So for example, I'm going to CAS 113. Then that's how you make a string. Now you have a pointer to a string, And this pointer, if you want to use it, this is going to be your CAS 313, and you can't change it after you make it. However, if you want to be able to change it later on, you would say NS mutable strings. You want to make some string that you want to change later. Str is equal to NS, open bracket, NS mutable string. New. This is how you make a mutable string. And once you do that, you can use other functions too. So right now what we have is you have this string. You have a string, but it's an empty string. It doesn't have anything inside. But here you have a string that has this thing inside, but this one you can change, this one you can't change. And basically the same idea happens to NS array and NS dictionary. For NS array, oh by the way, this is the class name, NS array. Whenever you want to make point to something, reference something, you have to say this pointer, so star, asterisk, and then the name, this is the variable name. Allie's going to talk more about it. And then the fast way to make NS array would be add this open bracket, and then your object inside, I. So this is there are other ways to make a new array, but this is the fastest way, and people usually use it this way. And anything else I can talk about this? Oh, in this case, what you're going to create a list called array, and is a kind of NS array. And then inside there are going to be two elements. The first element is going to be an NS string. The first element is an NS string. So index is C start 0. And then the second element is going to be world. Yeah?
Is it possible to have an array with strings and integers?
Yes, you can. As long as there are NS objects. Except that people usually don't do that, so if you want to do that, you might have to keep track when you take things out, because it's going to get, yeah. You try not to do that, to have different things. As long as these are NS objects, which means as long as they're like NS string, NS array, NS dictionary, you can put anything inside, technically. And we also have NS muto array, which I'm going to write up, which is exactly the same thing, except these two change to NS mutable array instead of string. And then let's talk about NS dictionary. So if I want to make a new dictionary, I'm gonna first, again, class name, asterisk, meaning it's a pointer, and then a name. And then this time, instead of during brackets or quotes, we do at, open brackets, the key name. For example, this key I'm going to see. Oh, the key is an NS string, by the way. This is an NS string itself. And then colon, the object. Well, I want to actually, as long as this is an NS string, well. So in that case, we're going to make an NS dictionary that. So right now there's only one element. So and there's no 0 or 1 because it's on a list. Except I have a key called CAS 113. And in that key, I have this element, world. So this, okay, quick recap. So we have NS string, NS array, and NS dictionary. And what are they? NS string holds words, NS array holds a list of objects, NS dictionary holds a list of objects except that you retrieve it by key. It's like hash map in Java. Or I think it's all about dictionary in Python. In MATLAB, I don't think that's. And for NS array, same thing, a list of things, and also you should find key indexes. Oh, and one important thing is that if you only learned MATLAB before, the indexes start at 0, not 1. Okay, and then we talk about how you make a new one, make a static one, or make one that you can change later on. And now we're going to talk about how to change it. So, in order to change it, it has to be mutable. In other words, all the things I'm going to talk about later, but right now, it's going to be you can only apply it to mutable ones. So for string, this is the variable name. So for example, this one, you're going to say append when you want to add new things to the end of it. I don't know. Bracket. So these syntaxes, Allie later is going to talk about it later on. So all you know is that I'm calling append and then I'm giving it this. So what happens is if you originally have this, what you have right now is a string that contains nothing. But then once you append it, then the string is going to add 1, 2, 3 to the end. In other words, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. If you call this thing, if you add a line again, do the exact same thing, it's going to get 1, 2, 3. It's going to keep adding. If you keep, yeah, that's the idea. And so this is how you manipulate a string. And you can also do array, same idea. I want to add an object to the end, like index 2, and I would say add object. And then put whatever your NS object in each time. This is whenever I write this, it means it's an NS string. If you want to put, it doesn't have to be a string. As long as it's an object, you can put it inside an array. And so the next one is also add key dictionary. Oh, this is for adding object. What if you want to take something out? Just like any other programming language, you do, let's say I want the object at index 2, then you will say array 2. And if you want 0, 1, whatever it is, so if you say array 0 on this array, you're going to get high back. Dictionary, same idea. If I want to get this object world out from CAS 130, I'm going to put brackets, square bracket, and then CAS 130, 330. Then you're going to get back your world out. And if you want to set a new key, you can just say dict. I think I remember it exactly. I think set something for key. Well, don't worry about that. I don't remember.
It's like set object.
Yeah, something like that. Oh, well, actually, you can just do, well, this is accurate. You can just do, I know, CA, and then it's equal to something. Error result. Then you can set some. Then, after you do that, whenever you want to get an object with this key, you're going to get whatever you set it before. So, okay. Cool. So we talked about NS string, NS array. Oh, I'll move that. So these are basically the main 3 things that you're going to use. There are also another one that I just want to bring up is NS state, which is, as it implies, store state. So if you want to make a new one in a state, so you do the same thing, star, and give it a name, is equal to NS state new. And if you do something like that, this now you're going to have a state that stores whenever this program line is run. So for example, if you have a program and you run it right now, and then it's going to say, then this new date is going to store the time right now. And then another really helpful thing that you're going to use a lot if you program an interface is NSLog. Basically, it prints whatever you have. Like you can print anything to the console. Do you guys know what console is? Like if you have Java, it's called system.out.println. basically prints out whatever the state is of any of the objects that you want to print out. I'm going to show you an example later on. So for example, I want to print out the state. I can just go at %, I was doing it in a second, date. So what happens is, I'm NS logging, which means I'm printing out something. What am I printing out? I'm printing in a string because at that is how you make a string. And then you have %at. %at means that it's looking for something behind that, after the string, after the comma, and it's going to substitute it when it's actually printing out. %s is only for objects. So if you want to print something like an integer, you have to say %i or %d. So for example, let's say I want to say, oh, what is this variable state at that time? Then you can do nslog at %at, comma, whatever that thing is. And actually, it doesn't have to be, like, you can put anything inside. You can put, just say program has reached here, for example. Then what happens is, when the program runs to this line, it's going to print out program has reached here. You can use it for like debugging or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick example of how to use some of these. So if you open an Allie, you say create new project, single queue application. Well, I hope you guys know what that is. So it's just like make a new product name. NS array, or NS objects, samples. Make a new one, create anywhere. Cool. So now we have. So I'm just gonna run a random closure. Like this is the function, which is at like the beginning of your app when your app loads. It's gonna run here. So it's gonna be at your app delegate that is going to trigger first method that is run when your app loads. So let's do an example. Let's say we want to make a string of hello world. Let's make an array. Let's make it, I don't know. I just want to store the string. I just want to store that hello world into the array. And let's make a dictionary. And let's have the key CS. So right now we have three data structures. We have a string, str is a string called hello world. And we also have an NS array, which is a list of elements, and right now there's only one element in the list. Oh, let's add one more. Let's add, I don't know. And then here, dictionary. Here we have dictionary objects, and we have this key here, CS313, and then we have hello world. So if we ns-lock the string, what I expect is that it's going to print out hello world in the top here, because I'm printing out the string, and then when it runs to this line, the string is going to come in here, and then it's going to print out. If I want to print out other ones as well, it's just array, I can print out anything. Didn't. And if we go to the end, it says. So what I would expect is that when I run this program, when it reaches this line, it's going to print out hello world. If we print out this one, but when it goes to this line, it's going to print out the entire array, which means that it's going to print out hello world, I don't know as well. If we go to this line, it's going to print out CS313 and hello world. Just I'll say you what it is, tell you what it is, and then that's the end. Let's run it.
Hey, Tim, can you zoom in at all?
Oh, you can see it? Oh, what do you do? So, well, I can just. So, right now when I run this program, it's going to print here. First, as we expected, it prints out hello world, and then it prints out an array, the objects, hello world, and I don't know. And then also prints out the dictionary, which has a key of CS313 and hello world, and then it prints out an end, as we said here. And let's say I just want the element, I just want the second element, which is index 1, because it starts with 0. And let's say I would just want the key CS1. Oh, let's try something. Let's say I give it some random key that it doesn't, like the object doesn't exist. There's nothing in that key. Then what is happening is it's going to say no, because there's nothing inside at that location. And also, as we saw here, it's the second element, so we expect I don't know. And so it only prints out I don't know instead of the entire ring. And also it prints out n at the end. Sounds good? Makes sense? So we're going to move on.
Okay guys, so if you haven't had an Xcode project before, this is obviously what it looks like. And this is a single view application. One of the things that's really important with iOS development is the .h and the .m files, and that is the .h is the header and the .m is the implementation. In the header, you have basically all of your objects that you're going to be using in the class, and then in the .m, you have all the methods that are going to be doing things. And in a single view application, you're going to get, you can see tcViewController.h and tcViewController.m. Those are very important. That's basically taking a view controller, which is the main thing that you start with. You can see this information. Yeah. This is what just a blank view controller looks like. And that's what you start with. And you're customizing it when you write anything in the .m or the .h. So you're just trying to make it however you want it to look. So we start with the .h. big enough? You guys, this is fine. I can make it bigger. Okay. Thank you. So when you first create the class, you're going to see basically just this line with some import statements at the top, and then this end. And what you end up doing is adding brackets here and there, and creating any variables that you're going to be using in the class right in there. There are two types of variables. There are instance variables, which just basically create a storage slot for an object. And this object can be an integer, it could be an NS string, it can be whatever you want. Then there's also a property, which is more dynamic in that you can create getters and setters for this and really kind of edit how it's going to be set whenever you end up changing the variable. So this is an example of a property which is created outside of the braces. One thing you might notice with this is that there's a start here, and that is not something that goes in like a variable name. That's actually to dictate what's a pointer and what's not a pointer. And pointers are for efficiency. So when you have an object, it can get really big, especially if you've got like this really cool object, like say you're making a recipe and you want to keep track of an array of images so that you can show people what the recipe looks like as you're making it and all the instructions and everything. You're going to have this huge object in memory, and instead of constantly moving that object around, you have a pointer that just points to it. So that's what that little asterisk is. Integers don't have this because they're so small that it doesn't really matter for efficiency's sake. So that's something to keep in mind. This is how you would write a property, which, like I said, is you can make setters and getters for that, which is helpful when you're, editing like a string, when you're constantly editing it, or when you're constantly changing an integer, things like that. So that's all of the .h, and then we're into the .m. Here, I'll take the .m. .m is where you're declaring your methods. So this is one method. Always include this in my one. This is one method that you're always going to see in a UI view controller class, and it's called whenever the view controller starts up originally, and you're going to edit it a lot. Always edit it below super, and it's what basically kicks off your application when you're starting. So it's where you're going to like initialize things that you want like that. In the .m, you can have any number of methods. You have a similar syntax to this, which I will explain in a second. Such as right down here, we're just going to put this and put it up here since there's more room. But just imagine that's the continuation of that. two types of methods. You can see there's the plus here versus the minus here with this method. The plus is for a class method, and that's usually used to create initializers on an object that you're creating, whereas the instance method is called on like an object of the class. The syntax for a method is fairly easy once you get it, but it can be a little confusing to just look at it. So this is the return type. Whatever you want to return in the method, say at the end, like you are putting a method inside of a method and you have return like return whatever. But in this case, since it's void, we're not actually returning anything. If you put void there, it's just a method. You don't really have any interest in returning something for this. But you could put int there, you could put ns string, you could put any object you want. And then this is the name of the method, followed by this colon, and whatever inputs you want for the method. So say you want to pass the method a specific integer that you decide in the muted low or something like that. You're going to put that here, and that too can be any type of object. And you can put any number of things there. You can put one followed by another one. So you just have to name them individually. That's that. Calling the methods. Come back here to the muted low to call one of these. So if you want to call a method, you're going to start with a brace and then say self. Since these are also a part of the same class as this muted low, you're going to use self. But you would put whatever class there. Then go with self, the name of the method, any possible inputs. You don't have to have inputs. If you don't want inputs, you don't have to put void or anything. You just don't have anything. Very simple. And then close the braces and semicolon. Okay. Putting method calls inside method calls is something that people like to do. Say an example is actually what Tim did earlier, which is creating a mutable string. So you can do method calls inside of method calls. This is just like allocating memory for the string, but it is a method call to the class mutable string. And then this is initializing the string itself with the return value of this method call. It can be a little confusing, but it's a simpler way of doing it. A lot of people don't like to do this kind of thing because it's not as explicit, but it is an option. And for simple things like any classes that Apple has, it's fairly standard to do it this way because they know what they're doing. One more thing about properties too, there are a lot of ways to set and get the properties. There are like 3 different ways usually you want to do that. So say you have this property string. You can set this string by saying this way. Like I said, there setters and getters. So the one to set the string itself is set property string, and then to get the string, it's just property string. Very simple. Or self dot. And another option that's very common now is self dot property. And lastly, you can synthesize it, which is like basically synthesizing the setters and getters, and you do that by in the .m, you say synthesize property strings. And that's how you synthesize the setters and getters. And then once you've done that, you add some. Oh, sorry. There we go. And then once you've done that, you don't even need to do this self thing. You can just say property string equals active up. So yeah, that's everything.
I just want to add to that, like this allocate it, it might seem overwhelming, but it's basically, so it used to be that you have to allocate it, but then now you actually don't. It's that, as I said before, you use new instead of allocate it, it's the exact same thing. And also, what a property is. Property is just something that is used in some class. So, for example, in Java, you also have like property declared on top, like things that you want to use in some class. And to access things, this cell means that it's an instant object. It's referring to instant object itself. In C++, it's called this. In Java, it's called this as well, I think. And self dot something that you're referring. You always need to have property in order to use this self dot something. And whenever you do make property, it's automatically generated these methods to set it or to change it or to get it. Okay, now we're going to take a 5-minute break. And afterwards, we're going to talk about model view controller, which means we're actually going to see how it works on an app. Sounds good? Yay! If you have any questions, how an app?
Yes, sir. It was good. I mean, you better put out.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we definitely have. Yeah. Oh yeah. So basically, Jane had and I put something in. I put it on the board and they use it on I give it data no, also another function. But yeah, probably another function. I'll compile and give it another. Yeah. Or yeah, or once you the plastic part, like with the driving have a variable, like I can press this button like initial item, like the plastic
Mine is tipped up. Because I remember.
Obviously not cool stuff.
Everything was different.
This screen was larger than some of it.
So I mean, if you remember, his eyes was not good.
But it's going pretty fast, right? Yeah, don't. Unless, I don't know. Whatever. Oh, yeah. Once you finish that class, you'll understand a lot of what he's saying. Mm-hmm. A lot of syntax is similar. It didn't go. It was like closed something. Or like closed earlier than we thought. I don't know. We weren't able to make it. It was sad. We'll go next week or something.
Oh, did you know the they also live in your house?
Oh, really?
They're like best friends with Ayush.
I've seen Ayush come in and out of there.
Oh.
Yeah. I've never spoken to them personally. How do you know this?
Through Ayush and Ashwin. Yeah. You know Ashwin, right? He's Ayush's
Roommate, right? Yeah. What'd you end up doing yesterday?
I just met Christine Jen. Have you met her?
Christine who?
Jen.
Was she there?
Yeah,
Yesterday?
she's in Rush.
I think I met her.
Yeah, I actually haven't started the application yet.
Alright guys, let's continue.
Just do it Sunday. Just put like thought into it, and it'll be fine.
So here, this in the following hour, we're going to talk about like we can actually see what's going on with the screen, and like we can actually see like some very simple application. So first of all, I'll talk about major flow of view controllers. So what happens? So what are like how do you usually make like a view or something in iOS applications? First, you set up your set up your controller. Controller in storyboard. So what is a storyboard? Storyboard is a place where you can look at basically the flow of your app. We're going to show you later. And after that, you may connect. Well, set up storyboards include like adding elements. For example, adding labels, adding pictures, or adding buttons to your view. Because your view without anything is just going to be a white background, as we saw before. And after that, we make connections with .h or .m file. What happens is when you make your elements in the storyboard, it's not connected to your .m file, which means that you cannot control it programmatically. So you have to make these connections to your .h and .m files so that you know that, so that you can control them quickly. And then the third step would be, oh yeah, just one big point is make sure your programming files have the same your storyboard view controller is of the right class. I'm going to talk about this a little more later to show you right class. And then after that, you manipulate or change your .m file to get the result that you want to. So that is basic. That's how you usually start with an app. Set up the storyboard, make connections, and .m file. Change .m file to get what you want. And then we're going to talk about, well, after this I'm going to actually show you how it looks like in Xcode. This life cycle of a view controller, and there are 4 functions that are like the most important. And Allie already brought one out, which is view below, View below, we have view will appear, and we have view did appear, and we have view will disappear. Actually, there's more of one. It's view did disappear. So these are the major functions that you want to, I don't know, change. Most of the time you're basically definitely going to do something with view did low. It will appear sometimes. These two usually not as often, but if you want to do something when you quit out of the view, then you would do something inside these functions. So view did low is when it's called when the view is loaded. Oh, as it sounds. View appear means that all the elements are already laid out. It's right before your view appears. So for example, every time when you appear, right before it appears, like let's say you switch from one view to another view, you switch around. Every time, right before the view appears, this function is going to be called. And then view did appear is right after that your view appears. That function is going to be called. So when let's say you want to do some animation, you want to animate something, you want to move something right when the view shows up, then you will call it view did appear. View will appear, view does disappear. It's maybe like when you want to save something, when someone changes from one view to another view, and that way you use view disappear. So, cool. Let me give you a quick example of how you use those things. So let's create a new project. Let's not this. Single view application, and I'll just call it major flow example. So here we have app delegate, my main storyboard, and my view controller. So remember the flow that we were talking about. The first thing that we do is we set up our storyboard, which is right here. And as we see here, oh, by the way, these are that's the file navigation area where you can look through all the files that you have in the project. For example, here you have the storyboard. This is your main view controller, and if you run it, basically it just shows you this screen, which is white. So you don't like that because you want something to look at. So what you can do is you set up your elements. So here we're just going to use a text field so that you can type something in, and stretch it out, and then I want a button here. Something crispy. Then there we have our setting up view control in the storyboard. It sounds pretty. So make sure. But how do you control it? In order to control it, first of all, you have to make sure that this class, when you click this button, you reference the view controller. What kind of view controller is it? And if you look at the third tab here, it says this view controller is a TC view controller, which is right here. It's this file, TC view controller, right on the right side. In other words, right now there's going to be a connection between the two. Except that the connection between two is only on the view and the entire thing, but not the buttons. So what happens is, the second step, we have to make connections with .h or .n file. So if we click this one, it's going to split the thing into half. And right now, this file is actually the .h file. If you press this on here, you can see it on the left side, but right now it's on the right side. I'll drag it over here. So that's .h file. So how do I make connections? Remember we talked about properties? So we want to make these buttons a property of the class. So what I can do is I press Control, hold it, and drag it to hit this side. And I give it a name. I call it text field. And then I hold it again, drag it here. But this time I don't okay, there are two types of things. One is outlet, one is action. Outlet collection, we really don't use it. I never use it, of course I don't like it. Outlet is when you want to change the style of the button, or when you want to change the button itself. But if you want to listen to the button, which means like, oh, whenever when the button is pressed, call me, tell me, then you choose action. So I just call it button clicked. So right now we have these two properties. Well, this one property in this method. This is directly connected to here, this text field, and also you can see this circle, right? This is the connection. If the circle is hollow, there's no white dot inside, then it's not connected. And then, this a little bit. Let's go into the dot end. So now we establish connections. It's just that easy. Well, maybe it's not. And then the next step would be to manipulate the .env file to get the wanted result. So what I want to do now is right now there's nothing. If you run it, let's see, you're going to get these two things on screen as expected. Except that what I want now is that I want to be able to add things to that text field. So what can I do to add things? So I want to say whenever I click me, that's just an example. Like, you can do it however you want. An example that I want to do is that whenever I click me, I want this text field to add a and b. I keep adding whenever I click it. So what I can do is that whenever I click it, as we established connection before, this is connected to this method here, button clicked. And in the .env file, which is an implementation file, which is where the actual thing happens, under here, we want to add the word that we want to the text field. So first of all, what we would do is we would get. First of all, first of all, I want a reference to my own text field. So the text in it. What happens is right now here I declare a pointer. I want a pointer to my own text field. So this is referencing the text field. I'm getting the text field and I'm getting a text from it. So whatever stores here is going to be whatever inside that box. And then what happens? What do I want to do it? What do I want to do with it? I want to. First of all, I want to change it, right? But I can't change it because NSString is static. I want to do NS mutable string instead. So I will call it mutable string. It's equal to NS mutable string. This is a class, and this is a class method. View string with string. So what happens here is that I'm making a new string, and instead of starting with an empty string, I put this initial condition to my string. So right now I have this new string, and the string will store whatever is inside the text field. At the beginning, it's going to be nothing. But then, if you keep adding, this is going to change every single time. So right now, this new string is going to have whatever the current string is inside. Current word is inside the text field. And then what I want to do with it, I want to add a word after that. Let's call it B. So what happens is right now, that string is going to add a B to the end. We're adding B to the end of the string. So every time we click this button, this is going to be we're adding B to the end of the string, whatever it is originally. So right now we have this new string that stores the original string except added a B to the end. But this is not going to be displayed on the screen. So what we have to do is we have to set it back. New string. So now what happens is, why don't I just run the code? So now I set my text field back to the new string. So if I run the code, click me. Every time I click it, I'm going to add a B to the end. Quick recap. So every time I click a button, this method is going to be called, and then when it's called, I'm going to have a pointer getting whatever is inside the text field. So at the beginning, it's going to be nothing, but when I click it again, this NS string is going to be entirely inside, all the B's. And then I can't change it, so I want to put it inside a mutable string. by doing that, how to do that, I would say ns string, and put the original string inside. And then after that, I need to add a b to the end. So I go uString, I append the string to the end. Right now this variable is going to have the original string and a b at the end. And then I will set it back using self.textField. Self.textField is referring to this text field. .text is equal to uString. So right now, so that's the line where you actually set your uStrings back to your text field. Make sense? You click clicking, it's just going to keep appended. So, wow, we're going to keep time.
Does anyone have questions?
Does anyone have questions?
Yeah.
Question? So that is the flow of like how you usually set up a view controller. So right now we're going to talk about two main things that are being used in Objective-C that are used. You can actually find in every single app, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you want. It's called UI View, UI Navigation. So what is that? It's a container that contains other. Well, I don't know. I'll just say it's a container. It's a container that contains other view controller. Oh, by the way, the thing that we were doing just now was a view controller, and this is a navigation controller, which means that it controls the flow of views. So let's say Facebook app, and you have your own name, you might like slide to the right and then to a new view. That would be a navigation controller. And the general flow, how you would do it, is as the following. First, you have embed view controller in navigation. Navigation controller. Well, this is done in storyboard. Done. And then you set up your push in, well, and then you set up your push, oh, I'm just going to set up push. Push is basically an action that pushes your view to the next view. And you can pass data if you need it. Because sometimes when you want to switch from one view to another view, you would want things to be passed around. And you would pass data. And then when you finish, you will hop. So there are two major flow, I guess, major transition. There are two major transition of navigation controller. One is push, as I use to present details of things, or you have pop, which basically returns to the view before. And there are two major functions. There are one major function that we want to pass data to the destination. If you set your things up on the storyboard, you have to manipulate or to change this function called prepare for sender. So this function is what you would use to pass data to your detail. And your step would be get the pointer to the destination view. And then, set the appropriate value that you want. Okay, quick recap. So right now I'm talking about UX navigation controller, which is a controller that is used like in Facebook Share, where you press a button and it swipes to the left and then goes down the new views. The general flow would be first you embed your view controller to navigation controller. Make sure that you embedded it. This is done in storyboard, and then you set up your push, also inside storyboard, and then you pass data in your .m file if you need it, and then when you're done with it, you pop back down. And there are two main transitions. One is push, usually used to details. These are inside of it, by the way. Oh wait, did I say form? Usually used to show details of something. For example, like you click your friend's name and then it shows their page, swipe to the right. Or you can pop, which is swipe back to the left, back to your original view before. And if you want to pass data to your destination, which you're going to do it quite often, you're going to change your prepare for segue method. And then in that method, what you do is you first get the pointer to your destination view controller. You set the appropriate values that you want to pass. And we're going to do a quick demo of that right now. So back to the storyboard, which is right here. First of all, what's the first step? Can someone tell me what the first step is to set up your navigation controller?
Embed the view controller.
Embed the view controller. Yes, exactly. So what you do is in your storyboard, you go editor. Oh, well, first you have to choose your view controller, obviously. Okay, now it goes to the view controller. You say editor, embedded navigation controller. Press it. Well, it doesn't show an animation, but it usually does. Okay. So right now you have this navigation control, and you may also notice there's a bar on top. If you want to type it, it's a title. You can just type anything there for a title. So right now your view is going to be inside a navigation controller, which means that you can do anything with like pushing, popping, or anything that you want. So what's the next step? The next step would be, I'm going to my notes, is to set up a push. So first of all, you want to push something, right? And you want to push it to a new view controller. So you need to have a new view controller in the first place. So how do you do that? You go to the right side, open this. Now under here, you type UI view controller. You drag it in here. That's new view controller that you want to pop in. So and then how do you push it? How do you set up the push? So it really depends on how you want to do it, but how I'm going to do it here is just I'm going to have a button. Oops. Well, I have a button here. I call it push. Oops. Push. And whenever I click a button, it's gonna push. Wait. Click a button. Oh, by the way. Oh, so I have to control, drag it to a new thing, and then I choose push. Looks good. And what happens is when I push the button, when I press the push, it's gonna go to this new view. Let's try it. Okay, so I just hit play, and I push. It's gonna go new ones. I wanna go back and press this button. Sounds good. So, okay, so we've talked about push, we didn't talk about pop yet, and we didn't talk about passing data. So let's try doing passing data. So what if, okay, let me put the push button up there. And what if I want a label here? And I want this label to have whatever this field has when I click the push button. Let's say this field, let's type in ABC. If I press push, open it, I want this to be ABC. How do I do that? So first of all, because this right now, this is itself a UI view controller and it's not connected to anything that we have in our program, which means that we cannot control it unless we make some files to represent it. So why don't I put this here in the whatever panel is on. I go new file. I want a new Objective-C class, and I want to call it detailed view controller. UI view controller. It's a subclass of UI view controller, and I want to call it UI detailed view controller. It's just a naming thing. Then if I create it, I will have two new view controllers on here. Oh, one new view controller, except it's .animation on it. So what happens is, but right now these two are still not connected. This is still not connected to that because remember when I was talking about this, I went here and here to the side, and the third tab, here it says TC view controller, which is exactly the same as this one. That's why there's a connection between the two, but this, it doesn't say so. It only says UI view controller. So there's no connection. So we have to make that connection. So how do we do that? We just type it in. He doesn't like me. Oh. Well, I will close it and open reopening it. Sometimes it's a little weird, but here's what it's doing. So yeah, back in here, view controller, PC detail view controller. See, right now it shows up. So right now there's a connection between this and that. So between this view controller and this file. But however, there's a controller between that, but not label. The label there's no connection. So we have to establish a connection in order for us to control the labels. So how we do that? We go. We open this view again, and then right this time we choose it to the detail view controller, and also we do a quick thing like control drag. I will call it label. So right now we have a connection here. So right now with that connection we can change whatever we want about the label. So awesome. So what's our goal? Our goal is when we push this button, whatever is written here, it's going to show up here. Okay, let's try to run it. Let's see what happens. Push. It doesn't just change it, which makes sense because we didn't do anything inside the code about it. So what we can do is go to our .m file of this view controller. This is TC view controller, which is this one, this view controller. And then, remember what I said before, when you want to pass data to your destination view controller, what you do is that you subclass, well, don't worry about that word. Well, you override this function, which is called prepare or stagger. When you say prepare, it's not show up. If you do sex code, obviously. So right now you have this new view controller. I mean, right now you have this way to pass your data. And, okay, so according to my notes, it says that first you need to get a pointer to your view controller. How do you get that? So first of all, I want to get a pointer to it. Except that this class does not know about the detail view because we didn't tell them, oh, there's a detail view that exists. So we have to first import TC detail view controller. in order for it to know about, okay, there's a detail view that might exist. And then what happens is you first declare a pointer, tcd2 view controller. I'm just gonna call it controller. It's equal to, I want to get, well, this you just, I don't know, well, you just memorized it, basically. So segue is actually a variable being passed here in the storyboard segue. And then what I want is, I want its destination view controller. So, quick recap, because the view doesn't know about the detail view controller, you have to first import it, and then by importing it, you can make a pointer to the controller. And how do you get it? You say segue dot destination view controller. And what happens is whenever you want to push something, this method is going to be called, and the segue dot destination view controller is going to be your target, which is going to be this view controller. And then, okay, cool. So now what? Now you want to set that label to your text field. How do you do that? If you go into tcdetailview.h, you'll see that there's a property. The good thing about property is that if it is declared in a .h file, anything outside can also use it. It's a public, if you know what it is. It's a public variable. So what you can do, right now this controller is actually just that exact same thing. So you can do controller dot label dot text. So dot label would reference the label, and then dot text would label the text inside it. It's equal to self dot text field dot text. And just with these two lines, you can set that label to your text field. So let's try it out. So if you say click me, obviously it's not. I mean, if you just press push, well, whatever. Let me first stretch it out a little farther because it's nice small. Run it again. If you press push, oh, awkward. So what happens is when you create this thing, when you create this controller, that text field is actually not made. In other words, you cannot set it yet when you first create it. So what happens is you have to pass it to the view controller, and the view controller has to set it itself. So how do you do that? So first of all, you have to have this, you have to make a new property. So it's strong, non-atomic. Well, strong is just because it needs ownership of variable. Non-atomic is, you always use that. And you say and string, label. Cool. Oh, it's label string. Cool. So now, you have this label string, and then instead of setting the label itself, because it's not made when you call this thing, so it can't really set it. So instead of doing that, you have this label string, and you can set the label string because by the time you make this destination view controller, the label string is already made. So what you can do is controller dot label string dot text. Well, this is an so it's equal to self.text field dot text. So what happens is when you create the controller, the destination label string is going to contain, this label string is going to contain whatever you have in your previous controller. So what do you do next? Now we need to make use of the view to load. So what it does is when the view is loaded, which means when all the elements are being created, it's going to set its label text equal to self.label string. Okay, quick recap. So you have this detail view controller because when you first call this thing, that view controller is not created yet. So what happens is all the things are going to be empty. So you cannot just pass it like that. You cannot set it when it's not even created yet. So what happens is you have to have some way to store it. How do you do that? You make a new property in detail view controller and then pass it to this thing because this one has ownership. Because the detail view controller has ownership of the label string, but does not have ownership of the label. So when you pass it to detail view controller, it will still have it when it's first created, very first, like even before the view text, the elements are being created. So, and then when the view loads up, you want to set that label, set that text to whatever it was set before, the self.label string. So let's run it. If you say push, there's going to be nothing because there's nothing in the text view. But if you type push, it's going to show up on the next page. Okay, so that's how you use navigation view controller. And we have one more topic to go through. So okay, this is the very last topic of today, and it's also very useful. Well, we use it all the time though. It's just a transition called modo. I would just call it modo transition. So what happens is right now that transition will be pushing to the right or pushing to the left, whatever it is. But modo view transition is going to pop the entire thing on top of it. So what happens is you have a view like that, and then if you have a modo view transition, instead of pushing to the right to this view, it's going to push this thing on top of this. But you can actually see it being popped on top. So, okay. Pop up on the top of Kern view. And you can dismiss this, obviously, when needed. And the basic flow is kind of like the navigating view controller where you have to set it up in the storyboard. Well, I'll just write flow, general flow. We set up the storyboard, set up in the storyboard. And then, yeah, it's just that, not even kidding. And then, but when you're done with it, how do you take it back out? You say so, dismiss view controller. Well, I was gonna write that like that because you don't call it exactly like that. Yeah. So let's make a demo. So here what we have is a push segue. Oh, whenever that transition from one view to another view, we call that a segue. And oh, actually, if you didn't realize, well, the new way of Apple doing things is like you can slide like that instead of pressing a button. Well, random things. Anyways, so right now I don't want to push segue. Instead, I want to pop segue. I want to modal transition. So what I do is the exact same thing, except right now I don't choose push. I choose modal. If I run it, push, it can show up. Yeah. Well, it doesn't look like anything, but let me run again. Let me type something here. Push, then it's going to show up. Like instead of popping to right, yeah, completely covers it. And also realize that there's no tab bar up there. In other words, if you make an app like that, the user, when they come to this page, there's no way they can get back out. Which, in other words, you need to have some way to get back out. How? Since we have time, we're gonna do a quick example of that, and then we're gonna be done. So, if we say button, if I want to make a button, I just want to go like that. Just gonna call it back. So whenever you have a button and you want to listen to it, what do you do? Anyone?
View controller.
Yeah, view controller. What do you do with it?
You drag it. Oh, you have to like add some property.
Yeah,
And then,
exactly.
The action.
Exactly, right. So, well, not the right one. Not this one here. It's a detail one, right? And then you drag it to the side, and not an outlet because you don't want to change the style of the button, except you want to listen to it. So, I'm just going to get back button. And then this is a connection to this button because before there's no connection, so you can't do anything with it. Right now you have this connection connected to here. Then in your .env file, which is your implementation file, let me close it up. You have this new function here called back button clicked. And what are you going to do? Well, when you click the back button, I want to dismiss itself. So you, like what I said before on the board, say sub dismiss view controller. Do you want an animation? You say yes, it's going to go back out. If you say no, it's just going to disappear right there, like no animation. Oh, well, let's do animation. Completion is when you want, like, let's say after the animation completes, do you want me to do something? I mean, in this case, we don't want. I mean, I don't want. If you need it, you can put a block inside. You can put any code inside to make it happen. Just that, just this one line. And now we run. If we touch something here and push it, originally without the back button, there's no way for the user to go back. But right now, with the back button, I can go back out. That's good. Thank you for coming, and that's the end of our tutorial for today. And if you have any questions, you can come and ask me afterwards, and we have office hours tomorrow. I mean, it's Monday, from 6 to 8, or 6 to 7:30. Thank you.
And there'll be another iOS lecture in 2 weeks. So this is.
Oh yeah, there's going to be another lecture.
Yeah, so every 2 weeks this semester, there'll be another iOS lecture so you guys can learn cooler and better things. But this is enough to get started. And if you guys are confused, you're highly encouraged to come on Mondays, 6 to 8 p.m. to answer any of your questions because this is pretty fast, but we're trying to cover as much material as we can in a short amount of time. So that's pretty much what.